We are here today with Sam Cahnman, who is seeking the Ward 5 seat in the April 2nd election. Thank you for being with us today, and we invite you to start by providing an opening statement that introduces voters to who you are and why you're seeking the office.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the State Journal Register. I'm Sam Cahnman, running for Ward 5 Alderman. I served as Alderman for 8 years, and before that on the county board. What I liked most about being Alderman was serving the people. Citizens contacted me with problems, and I figured out how to solve them. And while knocking on doors in this campaign, a lot of people have told me, "Hey, Sam, when you were our Alderman, you got back to us right away. We appreciate that, and we miss it." Now, that's the micro part of the job. The macro part is that being Alderman is more than just sitting there and voting on administrative proposals. A good Alderman should also be proactive and propose legislation to solve problems facing our city or his or her ward. And that's what I did when I was an Alderman before. State Journal Register reporter Dan Petrella did a study on Alderman proposed legislation at the end of my last term and found that I was one of the top 2 most effective aldermen at passing legislation. A lot of the legislation actually originated with ideas from constituents or to solve problems brought to me by citizens. Now, I differ from my 2 opponents in that I'm the only candidate running for Ward 5 Alderman who actually listens to the voters and will carry out the will of the people of Ward 5. 75% voted in November for efficiency in government, saying that they want change to the status quo at the inefficiently run Capital Township. Yet inexplicably, both of my opponents said at the Icon Forum last night that they like the status quo and they want to keep things just as they are at Capital Township. Well, spending almost 50 cents in administrative costs for every dollar of welfare given out at Capital Township is unacceptable to the voters of Ward 5 and to me, but apparently is fine with my opponents. We have major problems that we need to solve in our city are revitalizing our older neighborhoods, fixing and revamping broken infrastructure, economic development, reducing crime, especially in illegal drug sales, keeping our city on a firm financial footing, and keeping our city utility strong. So I hope to expound on these and also some of the things I've done in the past for the city over the course of this interview. Thank you.
Okay. As you noted in your introduction, you did serve on the council before, and you're seeking election back to your old seat, which you lost in the 2015 election to the current incumbent, Andrew Proctor. You've had 4 years of watching your successor in your old seat, so how would you critique what he has done during his term?
Well, you know, I think he's just kind of been a maintenance type of alderman. He hasn't initiated much new. I mean, he had good ideas when he ran. He said he was going to create a land bank, and so far I haven't seen anything along those lines. That was for vacant properties. Mostly he just reacts, as what I said in my opening statement. He's just reacting to things that the administration proposed. I haven't seen many really new good initiatives brought by him, and I've heard complaints, as I said, while going door to door, people saying, you know, he's not getting back to them. Well, I think one of the main functions of an alderman is constituent service. That's what I really like doing, is helping people and solving their problems. And I think he's been lacking there. I mean, he's a nice guy, has a nice family. One thing, particular example, is when I was alderman, every month I wrote a column for all the neighborhood newsletters, View from City Hall, where I talked about, you know, what was going on at the city and, you know, letting people know what the issues were and what was happening. Now, Alderman Proctor, when he first became alderman, he did start writing that column for about 3 or 4 months, and then all of a sudden he dropped it off, and he dropped doing that. And now what he does, like in the Enos Park newsletter, every month he just runs a picture of his beautiful family every month on the back page, but there's no substance there. It's kind of, that's the problem. I think you don't get a lot of substance. And also, I attended almost every neighborhood association meeting, and since I've stopped being alderman, I've attended some of the neighborhood association meetings, and more times than not, he's not there at the meetings.
When you look at Ward 5, what are the 2 or 3 most pressing issues? And then what would you do to try to address them?
Well, the most pressing issues, I think, Ward 5 being an older neighborhood, are, revitalizing that older neighborhood, or the older neighborhoods in Ward 5. Ward 5 is actually the ward that is the most central of any ward. It has more other wards touching it than any other ward in the city. So I think we made a start at solving the problem with these vacant boarded up houses. When I was alderman, I co-sponsored an ordinance putting a time limit on the 3-year time limit on the amount of time people could have to fix these vacant boarded properties or face dire consequences. And I think that needs to be, and this is another idea that came to me from a citizen, needs to be reduced to 2 years. But then if a homeowner can show progress that they've actually done something and they need an extension, they could get it. Because right now I think a lot of people with these types of houses, they wait almost till the end of the period. They don't do anything, and then the house gets demolished. Another thing, I think they have to pay $500 a quarter boarding fees to the city, registration fees for these boarded houses. And a lot of people have trouble. These are not usually wealthy people that are trying to save these houses. They have trouble paying these fees. So I think we should allow those fees to be put in an escrow fund at the city and allow that money to be used to purchase supplies to fix the house and maybe even hire labor. That's already being done with the Enos Park TIF program for fixing the facade and the outsides of buildings. There's a program there where citizens can get a 50-50 match from the city, but they have to pay their 50% into the city. The city keeps it in an escrow fund. Then when it's time to pay at the end, the city puts in its 50% and they pay the vendor. So there's already a precedent for that kind of a program. Another idea I got from Decatur is you could have, if people who couldn't afford to pay the registration fees, maybe they could do some kind of public service to pay off those fees. Because the main point of the whole law was not to punish people or to raise money, but to get these problem properties back on the, back in good shape so they could be occupied and used, or if that was impossible, demolish them. Another thing about demolishing the properties, I think the city should make an effort before demolishing these properties to try to acquire title from the owner and then find small-scale developers who would be willing to fix up and develop those properties within a limited period of time. And also on the demolitions, there's been a problem that I've learned of in St. Louis, where if you don't do the demolitions properly, there's a lot of lead in these houses, and it has caused lead poisoning to children who are living near these houses. That's what they found in St. Louis. And we need to make sure that the demolitions are done in a way that makes sure that it limits the spread of these lead particles in the air, so children are, they get lead poisoning. That's a permanent problem to their brain. It's terrible.
Okay. Citywide now, some of the issues we feel that are facing the city is, one of them is homelessness. So how would you, as an elected official, work to solve the homelessness problem Springfield has?
Well, that's one of the things that was going on when I first ran for alderman in 2007. And the incumbent at that time, Alderman Bartolomucci, was railing about the homeless at the library. And, he had no solution. And I tried to figure out what can we do to help solve this problem. So I came up, and this is again an idea that actually originated from a voter, with the Round Up Your CWLP bill to help the homeless. And now we have a law that's been on the books for quite a while that allows CWLP customers to voluntarily round up their bill or pay a specific additional amount each month. And then that goes to agencies that help the homeless. Another thing, and I think that has, especially during the state budget crisis, was instrumental in keeping the overflow shelter open that time. Another thing I've talked about is Capital Township has an enormous amount of surplus funds, and one of their main functions is to help the poor, and that some of those funds, until the thing with that government matter as to what's going to happen with that government is worked out, those funds are there, surplus funds, and they should be used to help the homeless, maybe by building a low barrier homeless shelter. One of the problems with the homeless is that some of them have trouble getting into the current shelters because of the strict rules. And what other cities have found is that with a low barrier shelter with less stringent rules on getting in, that helps to solve the problem. But that's only a temporary solution. We need to find permanent solutions so these people are not homeless anymore. And that one of the good things, I think, of creating the HOT officer, the homeless outreach team, is that they help the homeless and poor people reach, get access to resources that are already there that they don't know about. And I think we need to have more HOT officers, and that could also, help in solving this problem.
So it just is interesting. Were you serving at the time that Mayor Davlin put a task force together to kind of once and for all, it seemed, resolve the homeless problem, and that kind of cycle comes back around, and here we are again last summer with
I think I served in Mayor Davlin's second term, just at the time when he was died, and I think I was there, and I don't remember specifically what that task force recommended. Do you remember what the recommendations?
No, I don't.
But I do.
Apparently, no one else did either, because
they must be out there somewhere.
Right.
One thing I know that came up in the current debate on the homeless situation in the library was that Alderman Donnellan mentioned that Davlin had issued an executive order regarding people sleeping at the library, and one of the problems was nobody could find the executive order. And when I was alderman, which was subsequent to that, in my last term, I proposed and got passed a ordinance which said that every executive order issued by the mayor has to be filed with the city clerk. And so if that ordinance had been in place when Davlin had issued that executive order, that would have been right there in the city clerk's office.
Right. Okay.
Another issue our audit board feels is facing the city is economic development. How should the city go about attracting business to Springfield?
Well, I think a good start has been made with the creation of the Lincoln Land Economic Development Corporation. I went to the annual meeting on that very cold Wednesday last week, and I thought the new executive director had some good ideas. And another thing that I would like the city to do is I looked into it and to see if CWLP had any kind of economic incentive rates to attract new businesses or encourage existing businesses to expand, and there wasn't anything. I think we should create some economic incentive rates at CWLP, and we also need to have some programs to help or encourage minority businesses, because a recent article in Governing Magazine that was reported on in the State Journal Register by Crystal Thomas reported that the discrepancy between African Americans and whites in terms of economics is the greatest in Springfield from, I think it said, in any other community in the country, which was shocking to me. So I think that's something that we definitely need to work on in Springfield.
You mentioned you think the new executive director has some good ideas. What particularly is jumping out at you at this point from the EDC so far?
I wish I had my notes, but he said, I know he said something about like the marketing of Benedictine College, that one of the problems was they had a non-local realtor, and so it wasn't on the local MLS, system where they put all the local property that's up for sale. Mm-hmm. And being more positive. One thing was being more positive about Springfield. I think he said that people, when he moved here, people said, well, why would you want to move to Springfield? You know, putting our city down. We have a great city. This is a capital city, the home of Abraham Lincoln. There's a lot of good things about this city, and we need to, you know, promote that and, you know, pump that up and not, you know, not ask, you know, be wondering why would anyone ever want to come to this city?
The city did provide $250,000 toward the EDC. Is that a expense you feel they should continue, that you would vote for if you were on council?
Well, I think we have to see what the, you know, EDC does, and I'm hoping that it will do a lot to justify a continued appropriation, because we, you know, I have been, I think, lacking in economic development in Springfield, and we need a strong voice and a strong arm in promoting economic development.
The past couple budget years have been tough for city council, and the city had some tight fiscal times, and they approved several tax increases in the last 2 years, including the sales tax, the hotel motel, the telecom. I know you weren't on council at that time, but if you had been on council, how would you have voted on
I
those
wouldn't have
measures?
voted for those tax increases. I know the telecom increase was to help the library. Well, there's other ways we could help the library. I noticed in Litchfield, they have a library that then they have the neighboring townships participate in giving revenue to that township, so their citizens of their township can use the library. Well, we have, you know, Springfield and Woodside Township. Those citizens they're not citizens of Springfield, so they have to, if they want a library card, they got to pay extra. I think we should try to work out agreements with those townships, get them, and a lot of them have huge amounts of money, these townships, surpluses. I mean, that's all over the state, as these townships are really overtaxing their citizens. You know, and so that would be a way to get some revenue for the library. Work out an agreement with Woodside and Springfield Township and maybe other nearby townships to allow their citizens to use the library just like City of Springfield citizens. And then on the sales tax, I just think, you know, sometimes it becomes counterproductive when you raise the tax too much. People go elsewhere to purchase things, and what I suggest for new revenue would be that when recreational marijuana is legalized, which everyone expects that's going to happen in this session of the General Assembly, that the city impose a reasonable tax on the sale of that to raise revenue, and I would suggest using some or all of that to for our infrastructure.
What, do you have a figure in mind for what would be reasonable?
3 to 5%. I think, you know, if you put it too high of a tax, then you're going to cause people to go to some, you know, neighboring area and purchase the product. So you have to be cognizant of that, or they'll go and buy it on the street illegally.
The budget is stabilized this year, and since you've been on council before, what principles did you use to guide how you would vote on the budget every year when it came up?
Well, I think the principles I used was a balanced budget. I remember one time I think we had to, the proposal was made to borrow money if there was an infrastructure fund, and where the money can only be spent on infrastructure, and there was a threat of a bunch of police officers or firefighters were going to be laid off unless additional funds were raised. So the proposal was made to take some money out of this infrastructure fund and use it to make sure that these firefighters or police officers were not fired, were not terminated. I think this was in the last Davlin administration term. So what I did was I said, well, okay, I'm okay with doing that if we do it as a loan, not as just taking the money out of the fund, because infrastructure is so important. So the council did pass my amendment to make it a loan and that where all that money had to be paid back to the infrastructure. And then during the Houston administration, all those funds were eventually paid back to the infrastructure fund. So I think, you know, you've got to use some creative financing and to solve some of these financial problems.
Okay. One of the larger expenses for the city has been pensions. Certainly not an issue to just Springfield, but municipalities throughout the state have that, and we know that there's limits imposed by the legislature on how you can address that. But what types of pension reforms would you advocate for as a member of council?
Well, I think the most promising reform for the pensions are something that I've read that just yesterday is going on at the legislature, and there's a bill or more than one bill to put all these see, the problem isn't the pension, the Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund pension, which is most of the city workers. That's a statewide pension system that is actually in pretty good shape. The problem is the police and fire pensions. And the problem is that it's an extremely inefficient system. You have every city has their own pension fund for police and fire. So what is being proposed now at the legislature is creating something like the IMRF for all these police and fire pensions. And that, I think, would really help. We could put all that, you know, you have like, I don't know, a few hundred probably different pension systems. They all have their own administrative costs, their own pension boards, and all this is...
Over 600.
600, okay. I was way off. But, you know, if we could put all those together, and the problem has always been that some of the cities that had, you know, better off pension funds, they didn't want to be mixed in with the ones that were not so better off. But but the legislature could impose this, and the legislature needs to have the will. This is what needs to be done. It's a statewide problem, and that's, I think, the real solution to the police and fire pension problem.
Okay. You had mentioned we need to do a better job at promoting the city and what's good there. That kind of ties into tourism, which has been a topic that's been discussed a lot at council in the last year. How do you think the city does in leveraging what it has to offer, and what could it do better?
Well, I think, you know, Lincoln is, of course, our primary focus, but now we're starting to move into Route 66. That's another thing I think we need to focus on more. It would be good if we could find something else also to promote the city on, but I think we need to also, you know, get the word out more in Illinois and Chicago, people that are close, Indiana, Iowa, people that are close by that could maybe drive here in a few hours, and that it's, you know, a great place to spend a weekend would be, you know, it's much more likely we're going to get people like that coming here as opposed to getting people from California, New York, or foreign countries.
How should we do that? So you said spread the word better.
Advertising, maybe getting on talk shows. You know, the new, I like the new tourism director, Mr. Dahl. He seems to be kind of aggressive, and he said that he was going on some talk show in Iowa, which was good. And I don't know that that's being, you know, done all over the Midwest. I think he needs to do that, you know, promote himself and get on talk shows, talk the city up more in other, you know, Midwestern, central U.S. cities.
You had mentioned you'd read and were kind of startled by the findings of the governing magazine report. What role could the city play in the city council to improve race relations in Springfield and some of the issues that governing addressed?
Well, I think first we have to recognize that they're there and not say that, you know, we don't see color, and then programs to encourage, you know, the hiring of more minorities, which has been going on to a certain extent at the city up till now, strengthen those efforts, and maybe have some economic development programs that give incentives to minority minorities and minority businesses to open new businesses or to expand their existing businesses. I know Memphis just started this, I think, Memphis 900 program or 800 program, which was mentioned at the Economic Development Corporation annual meeting. I think, were you there? I think, Angie, you were there. No, you weren't there.
I was here.
You were there. But that's a program that, at least part of it, is encouraging businesses that are, one-person operated businesses to hire somebody. So there's a lot of businesses where it's just one person operating it. And then if we had, we're a different size than Memphis, so we probably wouldn't do 800. But if we could do maybe 100 or 75 businesses hiring one person, that would be, would have an impact on our economy. And that was geared. The Memphis program was geared to minorities. Memphis is a majority minority city, actually.
So assuming that, or when the rail relocation finally happens, say in 15 years, we've always thought that 11th Street's kind of the corridor that separates West Springfield from East Springfield. Do you think the rail relocation will serve to solve that?
First of all, I hope it doesn't take that long, but whenever it happens, I think the 10th Street rail corridor will be less of a barrier under the new rail relocation, because there's a number of underpasses or overpasses are being constructed, so that it'll allow more back and forth traffic. But I think I'm not sure if it was that kind of is, when you look at where the races live, that is kind of a dividing point, but I don't think it was because of the rail tracks. I think it was more due to the economics of, you have African Americans on the west side and other parts of the city, but usually the housing stock is more expensive there. And if the African Americans in general, according to that study, are in a lower economic rung of the ladder, then they can't purchase that housing. So I think the real answer to the problem isn't whether there's a rail line or not. It's improving the economics and the incomes of, bringing more the African American incomes more into parity with the rest of the city.
Good, thanks.
We're almost out of time, but we have one question we're asking everyone. What do you think should go in the Y block?
The Y block, I like the new idea of that Senator Menard proposed of where he introduced a bill for $50 million of funding for Southern Illinois University to build a campus there. And then I was pleased that I think it was just this past weekend, there was a story in the State Journal Register where officials of both SIU and UIS talked about, willingness to work together. I think it'd be great if that block could be used to create some, educational facility that would be maybe a law school for SIU and a downtown campus for UIS. I think that would be fantastic. Other than that, I've always thought there was a proposal put together by some architecture students at the U of I years ago, which proposed a mixed use with buildings that would have commercial and apartments and some retail restaurants. I think that would be another alternative, or maybe both could be there, a university and a mixed use presence. I wasn't that keen on the idea of just putting a park there. I think because that doesn't really create any economic development, which is what I believe we need more of in the downtown.
Okay. Well, we appreciate you meeting with us today, Sam, and invite you to give a brief closing statement as to why voters should choose you on Election Day.
Well, I think voters should choose me on Election Day because I have the record that I did a good job representing the voters of Ward 5 for 8 years, and I got legislation passed, good legislation passed, like the Roundup to help the homeless, prohibiting discrimination against women at lake clubs that had barred them from being members, giving local contractors a preference in bidding on city projects, 5% for those in the city and 3% for those in the county outside of the city, protecting our health of our youth by enacting a tanning ban and a ban on minors purchasing electronic cigarettes, and allowing ordinance violators to do public service as opposed to paying a fine. But some of the things we need to do for the future are we have to improve economic development, reduce crime, which nobody wants to live next door to a house that has people running, cars pulling up at all hours of the night, people coming in and out all day. So we need to improve neighborhood policing, and citizens need to be not fearful of reporting bad conduct to their neighborhood police officers. We need to rehabilitate and fix our older neighborhoods by strengthening our boarded buildings ordinance and making it more reasonable for people to use the registration fees to actually fix the houses rather than being punitive as they are now. And finally, I think it's shown by the fact that on the Capital Township issue, I'm the only one candidate in this ward that actually represents the true voice of the people as they voted on election day, that they think this current Capital Township is inefficient and needs to be replaced. Now, they voted to put it, the only question was, should it be merged with Sangamon County? And I think if the question was put on the ballot, should it be dissolved into the city, an even larger percentage would vote for that. But the problem is they do not want to see the status quo there. And both my opponents say they want the status quo, which is a very inefficient government that, to have a second government in the same boundaries as the city of Springfield makes absolutely no sense. Almost everyone says we should eliminate the government. The only issue is, should it go to the county or the city? So I think the voters can be assured that with me, Sam Cahnman, they'll have a representative who really does his job as a representative and represent the views of the people of Ward 5. Thank you.